Hello, it's Maggie, the Cheshire Crafter here. As you know, I've been making a quilt for myself using my old NHS uniforms. In the first video, I showed you the fabric pull, and then I showed you how to create the topper. And this is a beginner's guide to making the quilt. This is a throw size for me. Keep me warm while I'm sitting in my chair. In this video, I'm going to show you how to lay out your quilt sandwich. That's the backing and the batting. And I'm going to talk through the plans for quilting. And then in part 3, which will be a video that I'll upload, I'm going to show you the basics of quilting on a domestic machine. And I've got a Singer heavy duty machine. This guide is meant to be helpful for beginners, those new to quilting, or for those who are visual learners. The fabric from my backing is taken from a Dunelm duvet set that I've unpicked, and I'll just show you that as I've unpicked one edge of it, there's an additional 3 inches just in that hem, so it's well worthwhile unpicking if you're going to repurpose the fabric. Remember, this is a very high thread count, and as such there's a little bit of a sheen on it which is a little bit slippy on the machine. I'm going to use the wrong side, which is not quite as slippy as the outer fabric. Hope that makes sense. First, I'm going to iron it to get all those creases out. For my wadding, I have this soft feel polyester, and it's not big enough. I'm going to sew 2 pieces together with white cotton to make it fit. I buy this wadding from eBay, so it's come through the post, and it's been scrunched up to get it into the post to fit, and then it's been stored for a while. Now, I don't iron this. What I do is I open it out and I press it flat against my hand just to smooth out those creases. When you're laying out a quilt sandwich, you're creating your work ready to quilt. So this is going to consist of my quilt topper, which is right side up, the wadding, and the quilt backing. I use my bed so it brings it up to a level that's easier for my back. It's easier with 2 people, but I'm going to show you how I do it just by myself. You need bent pins, and these are just like this, and you need a lot of them. If you have 2 people, pull it taut. Just pull gently so that you remove any creases. The intention is to pin this without any creases. You will see I've got plenty of fabric from my sheet underneath for the backing. I'm a bit tight on my wadding. I'd recommend that you have your wadding and your backing 2 inches longer and wider than your quilt topper. I lay my backing down first and then add the wadding, and I pin and then smooth it out with the back of my hand. And then I'll lay the topper on top. And you can see that sometimes the wadding that we buy isn't evenly cut. That depends on the quality and the price that you've paid for your wadding. It can be extremely expensive. Many quilters create the patchwork topper themselves and send it off to a long armour who's a professional with a machine that can do the work of the quilting for you. And I like to complete my quilting myself, so I know I've done from start to finish by myself, which means that I need to do the quilting simply. Now, the wadding that you buy will tell you how far apart you need to make your stitch line in order for it not to buckle or come apart. This is usually 4 inches for me on this type of polyester soft wadding. I'd recommend that you be guided by your manufacturer's instructions. So starting at the top, you can see that I've pinned through about 12 inches apart, but I will use the excess fabric from the sheet and the wadding in another project. Nothing actually gets wasted here. Start at the beginning and then smooth down. I'll put my next pins in at this level, I think. Make sure that you go through all 3 layers, and I make sure I don't catch in my bedding. If you're doing this on a table, put protective wear down because you don't want to scratch them with your pins. I've now got a large area where nothing is pinned, so I'm going to pin either side of the Petersham ribbon. This is my jelly roll strip. I've pinned about half the quilt. The other half is hanging off the bed. So it's now time to start folding down from the top, and I'm going to do this in sections, making sure that there are no creases on the back. As it's becoming very heavy to manoeuvre, you can see I've cut the excess wadding on the sheet off. Flatten it out using the palm of your hand from the middle going outwards, and remove and replace any pins if it isn't flat. Fold down to where your next pins are and then lift the whole of the quilt up so that you can start adding pins to the lower half of your quilt. If you're going to buy yardage in either wadding or for your backing, go for a fabric 100% cotton. Try 60-inch wide. That way you're not trying to join it together. Where I've joined together the wadding here, it's actually so soft that even 3 layers of it isn't going to create a lot of bulk where I'm going to sew, so I'm not too worried about it. And now I've created a sausage that lies flat, and I can transfer it to the kitchen to my sewing machine. First, I'm going to talk you through considerations for how to quilt it, and I'm going to do that on paper, sitting in my comfy chair. You may wish to pause to view this. This is my design of quilt. I've never seen a quilt pattern written out, and I make my own basic design. So this you can recognise with the quilt in pencil, 49-inch by 61-inch, the central patchwork and the jelly roll strip with a Petersham ribbon either side, and then a white border around it. Now I've highlighted here in red where the quilting lines will be. First of all, I want to quilt the central patchwork area, and I'm going to show that on a second piece of paper. My patchwork measures 40 by 40. Remember, it was made up of 10-inch blocks, with each square measuring 2-inch square of fabric. I'm going to start in the corner, in the top corner, and go right the way through the navy dark stitching, one corner to the other. Now, as you go, there are 2 options here. You can either leave your tails loose and tie them in later, or you can do a back stitch. Either way will work. Because I'm going corner to corner, I'm not going to mark this out on the fabric because it's easy for me to see, and I've only got to go across. I've only got to aim the stitch and draw a straight line there to there to there with my needle. Once I've done that first diagonal line, I'm then going to start filling in the equidistance lines going up towards this top corner. So I'm going to miss out the joining seam here, and I'm going to start stitching here. Start in this corner and then come an equidistance down to this corner. And I'm going to continue to do that right the way up until I complete up to that top corner. Then I'll turn my quilt around and I'll do the same on the diagonal lines going down to this corner, using that first diagonal as my baseline. Now I'm going to repeat the process and go from top to bottom or bottom to top. It really doesn't matter which way you do it. I'm going to do the diagonal across the opposite way. I'll do the first diagonal line first and then go up to the top corner and then from the middle line down from the bottom corner. And you'll notice that I'm starting from the middle and working outwards. That helps. If you've got any rooks of fabric and material, it pushes it towards the outer edges rather than making a clump in the middle. When we look at the equivalent of each block, you will see that that gives each 2-inch square of fabric that I have will be divided by a quilting line, which will help hold it in place. Now that patchwork will need framing. Let's go back to our first design, and my intention then is to do 2 framing lines. One will be a square going round 1/4 inch away from the edge of the patchwork seam line. Then I'll go into the side borders only and do 1/4 inch away from the seam line on the white cotton. Then I'll look at the extended top and bottom of the quilt separately. I'm going to do the equivalent of framing here, but here I'm going from the edge of the quilt, 1/4 inch away from this seam line across the width of the quilt. And I'm going to repeat that either side of the jelly roll strip, and remember the top of them has the gross grain or Petersham ribbon. So I'm going to do either side of that. So the red lines on this are my quilting lines. I'm then going to repeat that at the bottom. You will notice I don't quilt round the outside edge. I'm going to do that when I add the trim. So that in a nutshell is my quilting design. I made some notes. Now the reason I'm increasing my stitch length is this. When I'm working with 3 layers of fabric, so this is my patchwork topper, my wadding and my backing. The cotton thread has to go through 3 layers, catch with the bobbin thread, then come back up through those layers across the top and down. So it's going to need more cotton thread to do that than it would if I was just stitching the patchwork topper together. In effect, when I was doing the patchwork topper, I was only going at this level. I'm going to begin with a stitch length of 3. If I feel it pulls, it doesn't fall flat, or it catches, I'm going to increase the stitch length by 0.25 each time until I get a stitch length that I'm happy with. If you have spare backing, wadding and a topper, you can test it out first. I always find it helpful to plan my quilting out on graph paper before I commit cotton to my quilt. Don't forget to like, subscribe and come back and join me for part 3 when I complete this quilt. Ta-da!